House do now adjourn. Mr. Jason McCartney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's an absolute honour to have secured this adjournment debate on empty homes. It's an issue that I and many members on both sides of this chamber have raised in recent weeks and months, and in fact only last week 3 members asked about empty homes during the ministerial statement on housing. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, if I may just digress just for 1 second, this debate may be my last in this House with my Movember moustache, which is coming off on the 1st of December. Like many Movember men across the country, I've sprouted some hair on my top lip to raise awareness, you can just see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, raise awareness of the prostate cancer charity and men's health issues. And I think all members of this House would agree that with the tragic events over the weekend, we need to be more open about men's health and particularly things like depression. Empty homes, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an issue that I became involved with due to my deep concern about overdevelopment in my Colne Valley constituency in West Yorkshire. It's home to the lovely towns of Slathwaite, Marsden, Holmfirth, Honley, and the Huddersfield suburbs of Lindley and Birchincliffe, and many more beautiful areas. And it was my concern that our beautiful Pennine countryside was set to be dug up for new identikit homes. The idea of greenfields being developed is bad enough, but it defies all logic to be doing so whilst thousands of existing empty properties are being left to rot. In fact, my local council, Kirklees, have just voted for a local development framework that will impose 22,470 new homes in the district in the next 15 years, with some going on Greenbelt. I say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, bring Britain's empty homes back into use first. Now, there's a real groundswell of support for this empty homes campaign. I've got to admit I'm a big fan of Channel 4 shows such as Grand Designs and Restoration Man, and its presenter George Clark will be telling the nation about the scandal of Britain's empty homes in a forthcoming television series which starts on Channel 4 next Monday and Tuesday evening. That's the plug out of the way. I have to say, though, that I think the government has responded really well on this issue, with targeted initiatives and cash to back that up. The inspirational housing minister, my right honourable friend for Welwyn Hatfield, and I don't use that term loosely as he's a master of his brief, having seen off 8 opposition housing ministers or shadows, he's spoken at me with great length on this issue, as has the minister here on the front bench this evening, and I know he will give more details of government help later. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know you want to ask me, what is an empty home? Well, empty homes are left empty for a number of reasons. For example, when they are between tenants, when they're being refurbished, when they're in probate, or where the owner may be in care or in hospital. But for the purposes of this campaign and this debate, we are primarily talking about long-term empty homes. These are properties that are stuck empty, and I believe that getting these houses back into use could be a quick and relatively inexpensive way of providing more housing. Now, how many empty homes are there? Well, across the United Kingdom as a whole, there are close to 1 million empty homes and approximately 350,000 long-term empty homes. And this comes at a time when there are 2 million families on waiting lists for housing. These figures, by the way, are based on statistics from the governments in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, plus some advice we had from the Empty Homes Agency about the number of empty properties across the UK that are not currently accounted for in official figures. Now, in my patch, we've been trying to get accurate figures from Kirklees Council, and I need to put the record straight on this. An original Freedom of Information request came back with a total of 6,864 short-term empty properties. That's properties with a council tax exemption. And 3,463 long-term empty homes. That's properties no longer exempt from council tax. And by adding in 1,000 plus second homes or holiday homes, that came to a total of over 11,000. Now, obviously, not all of those are available for bringing back into use, and I don't think anyone has ever suggested that. Kirklees Council, though, have now revised those figures and given me and given everybody else who's been asking a figure of 3,463 long-term empty homes. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, whether it's 11,000, 7,000, 3,463, I think it's one too many when there are people waiting for homes and that the developers are eyeing up our green fields. Now, the government have stepped up to the challenge. £150 million have been made available in the housing strategy, which will be delivered quickly, and I hope my honourable friend, the Minister on the front bench, will have more details on the scheme that he and his colleagues have been working on. Of course I'll give way.
I'd like to congratulate the honourable member for securing this debate on what is a really important issue, crucial to my constituency, where there are some 2,600-700 empty properties. Would he be shocked, like I am, to find out that local authorities can't bid into the Empty Homes Fund?
I'd like to thank the honourable member for making that contribution, and these are some of the questions I hope we'll be getting from the Minister later on. I think councils, community groups, all sorts of community people need opportunities to tap into these funds, and these are some of the points I'll be making later. I acknowledge that through the new homes bonus, 16,000 empty homes have been brought back into proper use in just 1 year, which shows what can be done. The Minister, though, the Housing Minister, has admitted that it's a scandal that 700,000, 750,000 properties are empty when so many people are in desperate housing need. Now, the Government announced last week that they're adding another £50 million to the £100 million fund for empty homes that already existed. So that's a total of £150 million. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'd now just like to set out some of the benefits that I believe there are in bringing empty homes back into use. Now, the refurbishment and reoccupation of these homes could clearly contribute significantly to meeting England's housing needs, as I've said. The reusing of empty homes can also help to protect the beauty and openness of England's natural landscapes for future generations by negating the need for development on greenfield sites, and that's very important in my area of West Yorkshire. The renewal of existing communities can take advantage of existing infrastructure, such as transport links and schools. Refurbishment constitutes a much more efficient use of construction materials than new build, and the reinvigoration of existing materials can also add to the local economy. Of course, I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend, and as always, he's making a persuasive case and a strong one on behalf of his constituents. Would he agree with me that there are, as well as many empty homes, changing shopping patterns have resulted in many empty shops? Many of these are substantial buildings which could be refurbished at a very reasonable cost and brought back into use as homes.
Yes, honourable friend for Cleethorpes makes a really good point there, because as well as bringing empty homes back into use, an issue in my part of the world, I know it is in his part of the world as well, is empty shops. And there are some concerns there are slightly too many charity shops, for example. And something I've also been thinking about as well is bringing the flats and apartments above shops back into use as well, so that we have families and young couples living in our town centres so they don't become no-go zones in the evening. And I think that would really help. So I'd like to thank him for that valuable point. Of course I'll give way.
For giving way. In Northern Ireland we have a scheme called Living Over the Shop scheme, which we have used over the last couple of years to actually provide accommodation above shops, and it does enable young people to get accommodation in the centre of town. Is the honourable member aware of that scheme? And if not, perhaps maybe some discussion with the Northern Ireland Assembly would be able to enlighten the Minister to the possibilities.
Member for that, letting me know about that scheme. I hope the Minister will take that on board, and I'm willing to learn best practice from all over the United Kingdom, and that sounds certainly a very exciting scheme, and if it's worked in Northern Ireland, I hope we can take advantage of that and move it forward. Thank you very much for that useful intervention. Mr Deputy Speaker, though, I'm particularly excited about the opportunities for reinvigorating certain trades and specialisms using local materials. Good quality insulation as well and other energy efficient measures should also be key to the renewal of empty homes. So there's lots of plus points. And also in my area, I'd like to see educational colleges like Kirklees College. Maybe their students should be able to get involved in utilising empty homes for hands-on projects. I've noticed that Kirklees College has a course called Construction and Building Crafts, and what better way for the students to use those skills actually on bringing homes back into use that families can actually use in the future. But Mr Deputy Speaker, as I've already said, the government has already acted. The reoccupation of empty homes has been included in the scope of the New Homes bonus, with 16,000 coming back into use. I would, though, like to see more incentives for councils to reoccupy empty homes, and also for the use of brownfield sites. That really would be a sustainable housing policy. I welcome the fact that communities and local voluntary organisations, as the honourable member opposite mentioned earlier, will be able to tap into the funding, so it just doesn't go to councils. I would, though, like to hear more about the government's plans on introducing an empty homes premium. Now, this would allow councils to introduce it, if they wished, a council tax premium on homes in their area that have been empty for more than 2 years. This could act as an incentive to get homes back into productive use. I'll give way again.
I really appreciate the comments he's making. I think it's very, very interesting. Does he not also consider, though, a premium might prove a disincentive where people might go under the radar? Properties might be put down as occupied, so they pay 100% council tax instead of 125% council tax?
The honourable member makes a good point, and I think that's why councils could actually have a look at whether they want to introduce it themselves. They would have the local knowledge, and maybe they should trial it on a trial basis. But I think it's good that the government are looking at different options, and maybe some schemes would work better in some areas than others. And I like the way we're happy to devolve power to local councils so that power is more local for different community needs. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, there are some key changes that also need to be made to the draft National Policy Planning Framework. This is what I believe. Instead of the presumption clause in favour of sustainable development, can we have a look at a presumption clause in favour of bringing back empty homes into use and brownfield land before greenfield land is developed? I'd also like to ask the Minister to assess the value of having a national low-cost loan fund. Now, commercial banks very rarely lend money on empty homes, so a sustainable low-cost fund could be the answer. This fund could be kick-started with cash from the Empty Homes Fund. It could be managed by a commercial bank in partnership with an appropriate body, such as the Empty Homes Agency. This fund would help private empty homeowners who need funds to get their properties back into use. They could borrow modest sums from the fund and repay the loan from subsequent rental income set at affordable levels. Would-be buyers on low incomes could also purchase empty homes cheaply, get them back into use with the help of those modest loans from the fund as well. So I'd also like to ask the Minister whether that is something he would consider. Cash for this fund could also come from the proposed empty homes premium, which we've just mentioned, which could impose, if councils wanted to do so, a 150% council tax rate on properties that have been empty for over 2 years. So these are all ideas I would like the Minister and his team to consider and come back to this House. And finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, how about a right to help local people rescue abandoned properties? Could the Minister look at an amendment to current community right to reclaim land legislation? Should local people, for example, be able to use a new community right to reclaim abandoned property clause, where they would be able to apply to a tribunal to bring long-term abandoned properties in their local area back into use? So, would the honourable friend like to give way? Lots of action already, Mr Deputy Speaker, and hopefully I've given lots of ideas for more. And I'll just sum up to allow my honourable friend here just to have a quick mention. Let's put renewal and regeneration ahead of greenfield developments. Let's use existing buildings and infrastructure as efficiently as possible with the economic, environmental and social benefits for all. And finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, let's finally get Britain's empty homes back into use. Thank you.
And I congratulate my honourable friend for Combe Valley, who made a really powerful speech this evening with lots of really good ideas. And the situation he described in his constituency is identical to the one being faced in mine. I really welcome the measures in the Localism Bill for neighbourhood planning, and in fact I'm chairing the steering group of the Truro and Kenwyn Parish Neighbourhood Plan. And we have come into face the same challenges that my honourable friend has portrayed so well this evening, that through the development of our neighbourhood plan we have identified a great number of empty properties in the villages and the city centre of Truro, and indeed other buildings that we believe can commercially and viably be brought back into use to create the much needed homes for local people. However, in constructing our plan, we are very aware that it will have to be inspected by the inspectorate. And those types of properties that my honourable friend has described being brought back into use will be considered by the inspectors as windfall properties, and therefore cannot be counted as contributing towards the housing targets that we are developing to meet the local need. So I would very much like the Minister this evening to consider that point, and when they're looking at the National Policy Planning Framework, to look at the fact that these windfall properties need to be judged on their merit. So if a good neighbourhood plan, such as I'm sure ours, when it comes forward will be, can demonstrate viable sites for bringing empty buildings back into use, they won't be deemed to be windfall, but can be taken into consideration for our housing target. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And can I start by thanking my honourable friend for bringing this subject to the attention of the House. It's a very important one. It's very close to my heart, and I know it's very close to his. And I was delighted that this move to bring empty homes back into use was actually written into the coalition agreement between our two parties, and that we've now had the opportunity to put some real cash into the programme to deal with it. I want to congratulate him also on his moustache and to wish him well with his fundraising as far as that goes. Like him, I've been in contact with George Clark and Channel 4, and I'm happy to add a second endorsement to his for the programme on empty homes, which they are taking forward. And he, I and they are all appalled at the scandal of the fact that there are 250,000 properties empty when there are thousands, actually millions of people on waiting lists anxiously looking for homes and unable to find them. And empty homes, as well as being eyesores and easily falling into disrepair, they're often an expensive menace to communities and to public services, attracting antisocial behaviour, squatting and vandalism. Now, the government knows very well indeed that we need to build more homes more quickly, and the housing strategy statement that was brought to the House by my right honourable friend last Monday shows real earnest of intent. But at the same time, we do have to make better use of the existing homes we've got. That's better for communities, it's better for the environment, and of course it's better for the families who can find the new home to live in. And we've been working at ways to bring those empty homes back into use, and tackling those homes is one of the key pledges that we made with the housing strategy. I just want to say to my honourable friend that he was apparently in some difficulty to understand the situation in his own constituency. The figures available to the department refer to the whole of the local authority, which is, in his case, Kirklees, and he might be interested to know that in the 6 years from 2004 to 2010, the number of empty homes reported to the department went up from 6,200 to 7,300. Extra empty homes at a time, obviously, when housing demand was rising. The good news for him is that Kirklees Council will be receiving £7,600,000 of new homes bonus over the next 6 years, because they did succeed in bringing 307 homes back into productive occupation. But if I can just go on and say something about what the government has done in response to the problems of empty homes. we've taken a number of steps which I think are of real importance, one of which is the new homes bonus, to which I'll return in a second. But in terms of cash and announcements, I announced back in September that we were allocating a £100 million budget so that housing associations, councils and community and voluntary groups can apply to bring back empty homes into use as affordable housing. And I must say I was astonished by the intervention of the honourable gentleman opposite when he said that councils were not eligible to apply for that money. That is absolutely not the case. We recognise that there is a very wide... Yes, of course I'll give way.
For the Minister for giving way. This is the information that was provided to me by our local council, by the Cabinet member who said they'd looked through the consultation, and the advice I was given was that they were not entitled to bid with the proposals that he brought forward. If I'm wrong, then I'll stand corrected.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, he has stood corrected. Now, we recognise that there's a very wide range of possible approaches to tackling empty homes and that different approaches are needed in different circumstances. Sometimes the council will be the right vehicle, sometimes it will be other registered housing providers, housing associations and so on, and sometimes local community groups. And the bidding guidance was published on the 21st of November. And registered providers of social housing have until the 23rd of January next year to submit applications. And I would earnestly suggest to the honourable gentleman that he revisits his sources of information on that point, because it would be tragic if Sefton lost out because of a misreading of the paperwork that is available to them. Now, no, I think not. Now, alongside the publication of the guidance on the bid system for the £100 million, we've also allocated almost £3 million of empty homes funding for this financial year to organisations who are ready and able to deliver now so that we could get work straight away. And this will bring 200 empty properties back into use as a result of this spending this year. Now, we're also setting up a national intermediary in the next few weeks to administer the community element of the funding. There are legal reasons why it's not possible for this to be directed through the Homes and Communities Agency. And this will allow smaller not-for-profit community and voluntary organisations to have access to some of the £100 million. And that will allow community groups to stimulate new and innovative ways of tackling empty homes, and I've seen plenty of those already. I know that there are organisations ready to go. My honourable friend mentioned the possibility of a rolling loan fund. Well, there are some complexities with that which don't appear immediately, but it may be that some of the models through that community route might well exploit that opportunity. Now, the funding is going to be allocated on a demand-led basis, or putting it another way, we're not going to stuff people's mouths and organisations' mouths with money. We want to see the money going to real schemes which will really deliver results. I might say, in parenthesis, that the outgoing government was great at allocating budgets to projects that could never be delivered. We do not want to go down that route at all. Let's make it every pound counts towards bringing an empty home back into use. Now, on top of the £100 million, with the launch of the housing strategy last week, my right honourable friend was able to announce an additional £50 million of further funding to tackle some of the worst concentrations of empty homes. And I would say to my honourable friend that without knowing the detailed circumstances of his constituency, I could believe that some of those higher concentrations would be found in Kirklees and might well apply to his own constituency of Colne Valley. I'm sure he'll want to explore that. And that's going to require a more intensive approach than simply doing a home here and there. Refurbishing and reconfiguring homes, and also improving the public realm and tackling wider issues in the local area. The funding details of this £50 million fund are being finalised, and further details will be announced shortly. But there will be some differences between that and the £100 million fund. This will tackle concentrations of empty homes, and it won't be appropriate for all homes to be brought back into use as affordable housing, which is the clear intention of the £100 million fund. My honourable friend, I think rightly, praised the government's initiative in bringing forward the idea of a council tax premium. I should make it clear that that's currently being consulted on, and I'm hoping that local authorities and others who are interested in this will respond in a very positive way to this proposal. This will allow councils at their discretion, and my honourable friend made a very good point about it needing to be tailored to local circumstances, councils at their local discretion to introduce a council tax premium on homes in their area that have been empty for more than 2 years, to provide a stronger incentive for empty homes owners to bring them back into use. And of course that's still possible for that to be coupled with a discount or a free period at the onset of the home being empty, and I think it will be important for local councils to configure their profile of charging accordingly. I've already commented on the new homes bonus, but I would just say that in the first year of new homes bonus funding being given to councils, £19 million of it can be attributed to empty homes coming back into use. As I've already said, in Kirklees, 307, but I say they've got further to go than Bradford nearby, which brought 1,500 back into use, with an equivalent budget coming back to the council. So again, my honourable friend might want to speak in the polite way, challenge possibly his council to say, what's wrong with Kirklees compared to Bradford? Let's get those empty homes back into use. Now, it was a rhetorical question, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I've no intention of responding to it. In addition to these measures, and separately, my right honourable friend has announced the housing market renewal transition funding of £71 million to help families trapped in half-empty and abandoned streets as a consequence of Labour's controversial regeneration scheme introduced in 2002 and far too often actually managing the decline of an area rather than fulfilling its task of regenerating an area. Now, following the